What is going on, guys? Joranathor here, and today I'm going to bring you another TCG deck profile of Exosister. I play it with some of the Magistus cards, and I'll go into those details in a moment. So, starting off, 3 Martha. Martha is what makes the deck good. Martha is what makes the deck pretty playable. Before we had Martha, it was always quite difficult to actually get into anything, and in the same vein, like Magnifica as well. Before Magnifica, we didn't really have anything to end on either, so they are very, very welcome additions to the deck, along with Returnia. But we play 3 Martha, and because you play 3 Martha, you play 3 Ellis, because Martha searches Ellis, and she's also one that special summons herself from the hand. So if you end up with one of the other Exosisters and you can summon Ellis from hand, you make Caspatel to search for Martha. We also play 3 Stella, because she is the kind of, before Martha, she was what made the deck run okay. You use her effect to special summon one from hand. If you have Ellis in hand, you don't want to use Stella's effect to summon Ellis, you want to use Ellis's effect to summon herself, because Stella can get impermed, ghost ogered, and then you just cry. We're on 2 Sophia. I've seen people running 3, I've seen people running 1. I definitely think you need to run more than 1. I think 3 is a little bit overkill. It could work. Now that people are using the spirits a lot more, you could probably get away with 3 Sophia, but I think 2 is like the balance point. You play 1 Irene. If you didn't have to, you wouldn't play Irene, but because of Vadis and Pax, you kind of have to play Irene to get the extra benefits, otherwise you wouldn't play this card. It's not good. We play 3 Pax because this says, search any Exosister card, so it can get you out of the bind. If you have Martha in hand, sometimes you'll play Pax just to kind of bait your opponent's Ash, because if they Ash Martha, it can be quite difficult. But if you do manage to play Pax and Martha in the same turn, you're probably using Pax to search one of the 2 traps, either the Returnia or Vadis. I play 2 of each. I think 3 of each is a little bit overkill, because you can search them with Pax, you can also search them with Mikais, one of the extra deck monsters. It's a difficult one, because it's one of those where you want to see them. Vadis and Returnia is just a really good combo, because you activate Returnia to target something to banish, and then you chain Vadis. So Vadis summons the 2, Returnia banishes 1, and then you get the second effect of Returnia to use the 2 Exosisters that you just summoned to go into one of the extra deck monsters. It's just a really, really good combo that you want to see, but you would much rather have something else in your starting hand, because it's kind of slow. And we also play the 1-off call by. If you get hand trapped in this deck, it hurts. As you can see, I do have crossout inside, but I don't feel like crossout in the main is a good idea. Mainly because if you see your crossout in the main, rather than seeing something like one of the spirits or one of the Magistus cards, you can't really do too much. This deck is very built around doing a couple things to get yourself going. So playing cards like Evenly, Crossout Designator, they are good, strong cards that you kind of have to play, but it's a difficult situation to be in if you end up with 2 Crossout Designator, Stella, Vadis, and D-Shifter. You don't do anything on that turn. You kind of have to be able to do something with this deck. And because of that, people have started playing them, and I've jumped on it as well. The spirits. You 1 of Aratama, 3 of Sakatama. Sakatama is just extending, because you can normal summon it as an extra. So if you normal summon Stella and go to use its effect, and it gets impermed, then you can normal summon Sakatama as an extra normal, go into Caspatel to get Martha. Aratama is complete full combo, because you normal it, search for the Sakatama, normal the Sakatama, make Caspatel, search Martha, but you kind of would prefer to be normal summoning something else. You kind of would prefer to be normal summoning Stella or one of the other Exosisters to special summon Ellis from your hand. So it's kind of a you use it, it's really good, but you don't want to see it. over Martha. You don't want to see it over Stella. You don't want to see it over Pax. But when you do see it, it can just completely be full combo. I'm playing 3 of Zoroark. It's been good for me so far. It has worked out. It can be very bricky playing like the technically three different engines. But as I have mentioned in previous videos, a lot of people at my locals will play kind of like one-off decks. There's a lot of branded going around. There's a couple Sword Souls going around. So being able to Zoroark, summon a Exosister, go into the Calamity, and then put Ioise underneath to stop fusions, just like kind of shuts down branded, and then putting like the Synchro underneath kind of shuts down the Sword Souls, and putting like Exes underneath. There are people that play like odd kind of things. There was someone playing the like rice ships that just Exe all the time, so if you throw an Exe underneath it, like, just negates all his effects. That's why I play them. You could probably drop them. If I was going to, I'd probably drop them for something like Prosperity. The reason I don't play Prosperity is because I don't own them. Otherwise, I'd probably play it rather than like the 2 tactics, probably even rather than the three Zoroark, because then you can add extra stuff into your extra deck. We play 3D Shifter because this deck doesn't really care about getting shifted. If you use the spirit things, like, oh no, the spirits are gone, like, you don't get them back anyway. With Zoroark, you will more than likely be putting the link underneath either Zoroark or underneath the Calamity if you make it, and the link lets you search for another Zoroark, so if yours then gets banished, you're not too bothered because you have another one in your hand. Shifter's just a really good card. Shifter just stops a lot of decks. Shifter also stops you from getting drolled. So if you open Shifter and activate it, and your opponent has like a draw in hand to stop you from searching from like Pax or Caspatel or something like that, like Shifter says, like, you can't droll me because droll has to go to the graveyard, which probably then makes you question why I would play droll myself. But droll is too strong not to play, and you're not always going to see Shifter. Draw is one of those cards like Shifter that can just completely shut down a deck. So if you can play 6 cards that can completely shut down a deck rather than 3, it makes sense to. If you see both of them, just hang fire and see what your opponent's playing. It's one of those where, like, you have to play. I feel like you have to play Droll to just completely shut down your opponent, but you also have to play D-Shifter because this deck doesn't care about its graveyard. I play 2 Ash with the 3rd in the side. Mentioned before, there's a lot of people that play Branded, and if you can Ash their Branded Fusion, it interrupts them a heck of a lot. Same reason why I'm playing Imperm, if you can Imperm the Aluba. So we got a couple of people playing Sword Soul, so if you can Imperm one of their Sword Soul monsters that tries to summon the token, it stops their combo. We don't have too many people playing the bigger meta decks like Kashtira. There's a couple of people that do play Runic, and there's a couple of people that do play Labyrinth, which I'm finding this deck is struggling against those. But I think a big part of it is because they've only recently started playing it, and I don't really know what to hit, I don't really know what to stop. So if people do know how this kind of build or this deck or something you could change in this to kind of counter mainly Labyrinth, because there's more people playing Labyrinth than there are Runic. But Labyrinth is always kind of like a struggle matchup, which is why I have 3 Denko in the side, because if you come up against Labyrinth and they set like 4, and you just normal summon Denko, you know, it's also a level 4. So very worst case, you can always just go into Tune, but like, you know, depending how greedy you want to go, you could Martha first, then summon Denko. But majority of the time, you just drop a Denko when your opponent has like 3 to 5 cards set. They can't really do too much. I'd say Imperm's in there for the same reason. Ash. There's a lot of people playing specific decks, and like if you Imperm the first thing they play, it kind of just stops them. Or you save the Imperm for your turn to stop one of their Omni negates. And I play 2 Talent, which probably should be 2 Prosperity, but as mentioned, I don't own Prosperity. But Talent feels like really good. This deck suffers a lot if you get hit by a hand trap, so being able to have this card to, like, lets you go that little bit further if you get hand trapped. Because if you get, say if your Martha gets ashed, you can Talent to draw 2, And if you then hit, say, like Pax, if you hit the Zoroa, something like that, it's then just like a normal summon that you get to be able to kind of do something. If your opponent trolls you, you can talents to tear a card out their hand. And if you go second and your opponent activates something on board, you can talents to just take control or something. Talents feels like a really, really strong card, but I play 2 rather than 3, mainly because you want to see it sometimes, you don't want to see it all the time. Once again, it's one of those cards that you would probably much rather see, like Aratama, for instance, rather than a Triple Tactics Talent, because Talent has that, like, if my opponent hand traps, I get to do this, whereas Aratama is full combo. Into the extra deck, we're playing like one of each of the Magistus, and then a second synchro for the Calamity. It's not very often that you summon any of these apart from the Calamity, and you always will end up with Artemis underneath either these Zoroa from your main deck that you play, or you will put it underneath the Calamity to be able to search for the other Zoroa for you to keep going next turn. I did mention this deck doesn't really care about its graveyard too much. The only card that almost cares is Zoroa, because you can special summon a spellcaster from the grave, but majority of the time, if you get to like your turn 2 and you've de-shifted so you don't have a target for Zoroa in the grave, like, your opponent's probably not done anything anyway. But the idea is mainly for games 2 and 3. I can play it in the main because it's just the locals that I'm going to at the moment, and I know what the majority of people are going to be playing, because we've all been playing the same decks for quite a while. There is the odd time where you think someone's playing something and they're playing something different, but majority of the time, like, if I come up against someone who has been playing Sword Soul for quite a while, I can more than likely just Zoroa and then put the synchro underneath of the Calamity in game 1, being fairly comfortable that they're still probably on Sword Soul and that it's probably going to stop what they're doing. But majority of the time you're using them game 2 and 3 for that purpose. Game 1 you'll just be using it as a slight extender to get Caspatel. But the Artemis lets you search for Zoroa so that you've got something at very worst case for the next turn. It's not very often that the effects underneath these cards pop up. This lets it gain a K, so if you are against branded, yes, it stops their effects, but they can still summon them. So if your opponent does still go for his like full branded thing, they've still got to deal with a 3-9 Calamity. The Exes underneath is to pop a spell and trap if you have a Magistus card, so you have to kind of like pop itself to then pop a spell and trap, but it can be handy because if you stop your opponent from Exeing and they set 2, and then next turn you pop a spell and trap by getting rid of this card from underneath it, you're not too worried about then losing it, because majority of the time you will then just be going for game. And then this means you can't be destroyed by your opponent's spell or trap effects, which has come up, especially if your opponent's siding things like Lightning Storm or they're playing a Go Second build. The Calamity doesn't have an effect in the spell and trap zone, but it has the effect from the graveyard to be able to pop a Magistus card and re-summon itself. We play 1 Zeus, probably would like to play 2, mainly because if you drop a second Zeus, like, your opponent kind of gets surprised by it, and they've probably used a couple resources to get rid of the first one, but because of the limitations with Martha, where you can only summon Exosisters, you don't really go into Zeus that often. 2 Magnifica, 3 is too many. If you summon a 3rd Magnifica, how have you not won the game? But 1 is not enough, because sometimes you need to go into the second. So 2 is the right place. 3 Mikais, this is like the best Exosister. If you could play more than 3, you would play more than 3. On the turn it's Exes summoned, you can banish a card from your opponent's graveyard or a card they control. If you banish it from the graveyard, you can activate your own Martha. If you could like have like 2 Magnifica and 7 Mikais, to replace the others. You probably would. You maybe play like 6 Mikais and a Caspatel. But we do play 2 Caspatel because it's the main crux of the combo. It lets you search for Martha. Mainly, you will be searching Martha. It lets you search for any Exosister. It's, you know, you Aratama, add Sakatama, summon Sakatama, make Caspatel, search Martha, Martha, summon herself and Ellis, make Mikais, search for Returnia or Vadis, or packs. You know, you can search packs to then search for another one just to take another card out of your deck. Overlay Mikais and Caspatel into Magnifica. Any point that you don't have Martha, you will search Martha with Caspatel. If you've used Martha, you will more than likely be going for Ellis or Stella, because Stella lets you special summon one, and Ellis special summons herself to make the Mikais. You play 1 Asophiel. It's like the kind of Abyss Dweller. Like Caspatel and Asophiel together are Abyss Dweller. Caspatel has the effect that your opponent can't special summon from graveyard, and Asophiel has the effect where they can't activate cards from graveyard. Majority of the time, you will make Asophiel on your opponent's turn in the standby phase or something like that. So the ideal situation is to have Martha and Magnifica. So Magnifica banishes something from their grave, and then Martha goes into Asophiel and shuts down anything that they can do in their graveyard. If you Returnia and then Vadis, the 2 Exosisters that you summon will more than likely summon Asophiel, because it's just very, very strong to shut down your opponent's graveyard. So you have to play 1 of it. I've only ever used the bounce effect once, and that was to put an extra deck monster back to the extra deck, and then I went for game. The bounce is very, very rarely used, but it's handy to know that it's there. And finally, 1 Jabreen. She's an Imperm, but she's also part of the OTK, because she boosts all Xyz monsters that you control by 800, and it's not just on the board when she's activated, it's any Xyz monster that you will control. So if you summon Jabreen, activate her effect, and then summon, say, Mikais, like the Mikais still gets boosted, and then you make those 2 into Magnifica, the Magnifica still gains the 800 attack boost. It's not just the ones that are on board, it is any Xyz monster, which, fun fact, doesn't specify Exosister Xyz monsters. It's all Xyz monsters, so Zeus gets the boost as well. Jumping into the side deck, previously mentioned Denko Sekka for Labyrinth matchup. We also have a lot of people that play Traptrix, so they'll be summoning like Sarah and then setting 4. You Denko Sekka them, punch the Sarah, you win. The 3rd Ash in the side, because the 3rd Ash can always come up. And we have a Ghost Ogre in there, because I'm also playing Crossouts in the side. Mainly what I will do for game, if you win game 1 and you know you're going 2nd, I will take out Zorroa and put in like Evenly, and probably take out like Talents, put in the 3rd Ash, and like a Harpy's Feather Duster or something like that. And if game 3 you can put the Zorroa back in. Game 3 I'd probably like take out the Ashes, put in say like either D-Barriers, or depending on what you're coming against, like the Denko Sekkas. But the Ghost Ogre's there for the cross-out target, because if your opponent Ghost Ogres your Caspatel, or they Ghost Ogre the Stella, it can just end your turn. 1 off Harpy's Feather Duster, you know, destroy or spell and trap your opponent controls. I feel like it's really, really good. Not amazing, because sometimes you don't want to destroy the spell and traps you control, but if you normal summon Denko, then Harpy's Feather Duster, and then, you know, normal summon the Nakatama, you've cleared the problem, got rid of all your opponent's spell and traps, and then you just go into your full combo. So the Harpies is great, as is the Evenly. Obviously you can normal Denko and then Evenly, but if you say battle phase, your opponent usually just activates all of their face downs anyway. But Evenly's also good. Like, I don't feel like I need to continue that sentence. Evenly is good. And D-Barrier, once again, A lot of people at the locals do play single archetype decks, so it's handy just to be able to completely shut them down with a singular trap card. As previously mentioned, and one final statement, if I owned Prosperity, I would play Prosperity. You need, say, like the extra draw power for this deck, because yes, Sophia is a draw 1, Pax is a search anything, Talent can be a draw 2, but it's because it can be a draw 2. Aratama is a search, Martha is a search. The Prosperity just gives you like that extra kind of digging. Majority of the time you'd probably do 3. You'd get rid of, say, like Mikai's Kaspatel, and then more than likely you would get rid of Nina Ruru, because there's not that many people who are playing Xyz type decks. To be able to search 3 cards, and then if you do hit like the Martha, the Pax or something like that, very, very happy from hitting the Prosperity. Worst case you can do 6, especially in games like 2 and 3, if you've taken out Sorrower, that's 5 there that you can take out, and then you just do a Mikai's to dig for 6 if you really need to. I feel like Prosperity should be in this deck, but if you don't own it, there are other options like Talents that I'm playing. Upstart could play Extrav, but you wouldn't be able to play like the Magister stuff. You'd have to basically play like 3 of every Exosister and just hope that you don't hit the Mikaises and the Magnificas. I wouldn't play Desires because Vadis and Pax kind of rely on the other cards being there, and if you banish the Irene, you then can't summon Sophia from Vadis or summon Sophia from Pax. Vice versa, if you hit both the Sophias, this card becomes even worse, which I didn't think would be possible. I used to play Prosperity, but the amount of times you hit the one of Irene, and then the deck's just so much worse than it should be, which is why I swapped to Talents. But if you guys have any questions, if there's something that you see that I'm playing that I haven't covered and you want to question it, or if there's something that you think I should be playing apart from Prosperity, because I know I should be playing Prosperity, I just don't have it, please feel free to drop it in the comments below. And as always guys, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.